we are going to focus on a couple of different theoretical frameworks and structures for integrating technology, giving you better perspective on what we're going to be completing by the end of the semester with the portfolio and some of the activities that are going to be done within the classroom, within the portfolio that you're creating. So TPACK and learning activity types and SAMR are all going to be combined theoretical frameworks that we work with this morning. So to begin, we are going to, actually, I'm going to start sharing my screen. We're going to jump into our classroom inside the Canvas shell, where you're going to find, we've got week 4, and there are some things in here. One is the class recording from Monday. That's always accessible to you. Today's class for you, for the online group A, is going to be very similar to what we did on Monday. So I will post our class at the conclusion of today, but you'll be able to actually, work off both video recordings just as options. We're going to start off here in the link for the Google Classroom online activity. And there you'll see that I've got it noted that this one is about TPACK and LATs. And we're going to springboard over to Google Classroom now to get to a different HyperDoc activity. And so as you maneuver through with me, you're going to see the TPACK and LATs. Now we're in the Google Classroom environment. And here we have a link to the activity. This is going to be just slightly different from what we have done in the past. I've used a different template, and hopefully you'll recognize this one is based on the 5 E's. I'm going to close multiple open versions of things just to keep my window clear. And as I navigate through this HyperDoc, this actually is used as a springboard to external URLs that also engage the students at remote locations. Again, we're reinforcing the idea that you're doing activities online with students and you're not doing them so much in a lecture format, flipping through slides. However, we do have some of that strategy being used, the lecture type. But if you're thinking about what we talked of last week with online learning activities and actively engaging your students, there's a spectrum of activity levels that coincides with Bloom's taxonomy. So we're drawing from a toolbox of a variety of different strategies to facilitate classroom engagement. In this particular HyperDoc here, I've used a template for engaging, exploring, explaining with additional links, application, we're going to share out, reflect, and extend, right? So the advantage in this particular type of HyperDoc is that it can become the base camp or foundation for students as they engage with the material. At any point in time, even though I'm sharing my screen and facilitating activity through the screen, the students like yourselves have your own platform to work from. You're away and not engaged in my shared screen. You're working from your own window. But if you get lost, you can come back to this HyperDoc and recover your tracks. So it works as breadcrumbs, but it also facilitates returning and curating content from this particular site. So to begin with, I'm going to then spring over to a slideshow. And this is integrated with Google. It's a Google Slides, and I'm sure you've engaged with Google Slides and seen this used on multiple occasions. This is going to be very low interactivity to begin with, but I'm going to turn this into an engaging activity through the use of the add-on Pear Deck. And I'll show you how I facilitate that as we move through. But I first want to give a bit of a lecture and discussion about what TPACK is and how we can use that to leverage our expertise within content areas and pedagogy. So that's exactly where I'm going to begin. And TPACK is the relationship between technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge. What you can find here, and you'll recognize some of these tools that help facilitate technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge. You'll recognize the Kathy Schrock guide. Hopefully you've built this into your technology toolbox. You can use this URL, and as a reminder, this has a curated list of interactive tools across multiple platforms, whether it be concept mapping, audio, video, timelines, even just simple Google Docs. You can actually get to the Schrock Guide through the use of this link. In support of the International Society of Technology for Educators and the standards by which we engage students and that we actually facilitate tech integration learning experience, this website also is a curation of resources that were built together to help support remote learning. Um, in your career now, you're going to probably see remnants and additional resources that began with COVID-19. ISTE is the home base for the standards that we facilitate uh, in in informing teachers and embracing how to become a technology integrated teacher leader. At the time when COVID actually and the pandemic was forcing us into the online teaching and learning and remote learning environment, many of the educational resources that were available for teachers were unknown. And so ISTE actually prepared this platform with free learning, free tools, teachers and leaders, ideas and tips, webinars and podcasts, and again, free open resources. So you can actually get through to the resources from the top. You can actually use these to help structure your thinking about what's possible in your classrooms, whether it be for when you go in the field or for your future. Again, part of a portfolio of ideas. Um, so I'm sharing this with you this morning so that you can leverage this and study this at a later time, but you can actually see web-based professional development that's asynchronous with a variety of different links to online teaching, lessons and activities, a variety of different curriculum areas, and then important topics that we emphasize, for instance, the digital citizenship and social emotional learning, privacy and security, and so on. So this is going to be one that's going to require you to go in and do a little bit more digging and research about specific tools that are possible for the classroom. As I return to the TPACK presentation, you'll see another curated resource for your toolbox called Wide Open School. Again, this was structured to help support remote learning resources. A little bit different platform, has a bit of a different feel to it with regard to the type of content that's available. Some curricular-based content areas, including digital citizenship, Black history and culture, reading and writing, fitness. Being middle childhood, you could draw from cross-curricular areas such as these here. And again, do additional research about the specific subject areas and content and objectives and outcomes that you're trying to accomplish with students. These are all vetted resources, and that's what makes them super valuable. As you can see, there's very little advertising, but we do have sponsorships. Okay, so you're not going to actually see these are used within schools, oftentimes not blocked because they are vetted. And back to the presentation. Lastly, I want to share another resource. This one is the State Education Technology Directors. And the strength behind this particular resource is that, again, it is advocated by technology directors from school districts, private and public schools. The rationale behind using this resource is that it, again, facilitates, it's curated resources, but it also gives you the background and categories of things that are possible within the schools. And again, likely these are vetted resources and that they're not going to be blocked within school districts. And a lot of times you're going to find you may have some really grand ideas about a resource that you could potentially use, and you get to school and it's blocked. So you're going to want to work closely with your facilitating teacher or a tech director to find out where's the open book of resources, what things are not blocked for student use. So as you develop your practice, you can, again, curate the resources that you know will work when you're on site. So part of being prepared to facilitate technology is to be sure that you have access to the resources that you're building into your lessons. Summarizing, you can see we've actually already been exposed to a variety of technology tools and resources, so you can integrate across the curriculum. We have our ISTE Nets for students and teachers. We're leveraging Google Classroom. You've seen the pedagogy wheel with the SAMR model built into it. we'll ultimately get to augmented reality and QR coding. I think Mr. Stevens is facilitating that in the classroom on site. We're going to use Pear Deck this morning. I've been facilitating through HyperDocs. You've seen Tinkercad, and we're going to gradually work into interactive whiteboard when you return from your field work. And let's talk now more specifically. This is really the dry context of the TPACK framework. And at this point, I'm going to actually launch a Pear Deck add-on. So before we were engaging with this presentation, I actually was able to go into Pear Deck and open it as an add-on. And now Pear Deck is built in as its own hyperlink and navigation bar at the top of this presentation. You might remember in the first class that we held together, I introduced the use of Pear Deck interactive slides with the social emotional learning blob tree. And you actually interacted with that and showed different, it showed different numbered blobs that were indicators of emotions. And so I had you put in a number. This is very much the same. However, I'm going into a little bit deeper types of survey instruments using Pear Deck. This time I'm going to have you interact with the content by responding, dragging, dropping, and also clicking into multiple choice questions. So here you have, I'm going to launch this, and then we're going to have a prompt, and I'd like to share with you how this becomes activated. So the two modes that are being shown here on my screen, one is the student-paced activity, and the other is instructor-paced activity. On the student-paced activity, I could launch this and have students engage asynchronously. In other words, I am not facilitating a step-by-step approach live and in real time. Students can engage with this, and it can be discrete, and it can be on their own time. And then in the instructor-paced activities, the one I'm going to facilitate this morning, where I'm going to facilitate the slideshow, and you'll engage while we're together in a synchronous time frame. And so this will load and then prompt for you to use your device or your laptop, whichever you're connected through. It will give us a website to go to and a code. And I'm going to set this presentation session aside here so we can see some of the features of Pear Deck. All right, where we are, I need to have you jump in here, and you can see down at the bottom with the red dot, presently no students are connected. Great, now I can see we've got a student in there. So you go to joinpd.com, and in the blank box window, you'll see where you add a code. And this code is H as in hilarious, I as in incentives, I instantly, J as in jump, G as in green, and B as in bandanas. So HIIJGB. And out of the 17 students, so far I've got 14. You can see down here in the lower left-hand corner, 16, I need one more, 17, perfect. Now that the prompt has been loaded, I can continue. And now I'm in my presentation. And so presently there is no prompt in the presentation. I'm just going to talk, and we're going to kind of use this context of TPACK to understand a little bit more about what this is and how it can be, what the intersection is of all of the philosophies. So this was introduced in 2006 at the University of Michigan. Punya Mishra and Matthew Kaler had put this together as a theoretical framework that they researched about teachers' uses of technology in the classroom. So based on three primary forms, knowledge, content, three forms of knowledge, there's content knowledge, there's pedagogical knowledge, and technological knowledge. PCK represents the blending of content and pedagogy into an understanding of how particular aspects of subject matter are organized, adapted, and represented for instruction. So content and pedagogy would be the practices of how we engage students in content so that they may learn based on their learning styles. At the heart of the PCK is the manner in which the subject matter is transformed for teaching. So the teacher interprets the subject matter and then finds different ways to represent the subject matter and make it accessible for students. This Venn diagram represents the intersection of the three concepts: technological content knowledge, and pedagogical knowledge. So presently in your methods, you're learning about pedagogical knowledge content, what strategies are best utilized for delivering specific content areas. And in this class, the methods class for technology, you're learning a little bit more about technology tools. So the blending of the technology tools, the content and pedagogy tools, pedagogy strategies come together, and you can see they're intersecting in pairs, but they also all three intersect in the center for the army green, and that's the bullseye. The representation of technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge is the intersection of all three makes for the best learning experiences for your modern classroom. These contexts are going to be very important for you to help to continue to understand. In the intersections as pairs, there's primary forms of knowledge in the context of the lesson that we're doing right now. So we're intersecting the content knowledge, what you're teaching and what is your knowledge of the subject. And that's, so in this example, you're going to need a solid understanding of content areas and pedagogy. So middle childhood content areas are across the curriculum. In your pedagogical knowledge, how do your students learn best? And what are your instructional strategies to meet their needs? So in this example here, you'll see in 3021, students learn best with hands-on and collaboration with construction of learning communities online. And that's where we are this morning. We're in a learning community, we're online, we're synchronous. And then finally, technological knowledge. What are the best tools available to you? This comes with curating all the tools, all the resources we've been sharing throughout the semester so far. Which tools do you think you know well enough to use, and which would be most appropriate for the lesson at hand? So as an example, in here, we're launching a Zoom meeting, and we're going to talk about the content area preference, collaborate in a small group, download a lesson template, and discuss alternative technology tools for online learning. So that's the outcome for today. You're going to be thinking more strategically about how you're planning to use technology in the classroom. You're also going to be in the field. When you're in the field, you're going to see how teachers, practicing teachers, are employing technology. The tools being used probably are more prevalent today than they were a year ago with regard to one-to-one ubiquitous computing. And we talk about this quite a bit because the classroom and time management is dramatically different when every student has a tool to use. They are all over the place. And so we leverage technology tools so we can keep students somewhat on the same path, moving in the same direction, but at different pace. And so hopefully you can identify what tools are being used when you're in the field. You can see some examples of how teachers are integrating technology. Many teachers don't really haven't been brought into their professional development with TPACK. This may be unfamiliar to them, but from your perspective, you're going to recognize the intersection of pedagogical content knowledge, technological content knowledge, and technological pedagogical knowledge. It's a mouthful. So we've got these intersections, again, understanding the best practices for teaching specific content to your specific students. That's the PCK, pedagogy content knowledge. Technological content knowledge is the intersection of the digital tools available to enhance or transform the content and how you deliver that to students, and then how your students engage. And then finally, TPK, technological and pedagogical content knowledge. I said that incorrectly. If you notice, I combined all three because it's just such a tongue twister. It's a mouthful. So the last area, the last paired intersection is TPK, understanding how to use your tools as a vehicle to the learning outcomes and the experiences you want for your students. So now this is where you get to engage with the slide. You are all logged in, and you should be able to see a prompt at the bottom of this slide that gives you 3 icons. So I've just hidden it, and you should be able to see it on your screen. The red pin represents content knowledge. The orange pin represents pedagogical knowledge, and the yellow pin is technological knowledge. Your task is to drag the pin to the associated description. So use your device to engage with this activity and drag the colored pin to the box next to its corresponding description. As a facilitator, I can see on my end already 13 of 17 responses have been made. Once I have 17 out of 17 responses for the students, I can actually lock the screen and accept no more changes. So until I lock the screen, you can actually continue to drag and drop your pins. And then I also will be able to show responses, but I'm not going to do that until I have all student responses. This is an engaging activity that was constructed inside Google Slide with the add-on of Pear Deck. Okay, and I've got 16 out of 17. It may be that somebody dropped. There we are, 17 out of 17. So I'm going to lock my screen, and I'm instantly going to show the responses and see where the blobs landed. Some didn't make it into the box. You can actually see that students kind of strayed off with their responses. The majority of responses made for the center do appear to be orange. The correct response is that the yellow pin belongs with the digital tools, and that is technological knowledge. The orange pin appears to be accurate. How do your students learn best, and what strategies do you need to meet their needs? And that is pedagogical knowledge. And the red pin is accurate for the third position. What are you teaching, and what is your own knowledge of the subject? So if you're trying to move your pen, you likely can't do so because I locked the screen. And that's part of the strategy for now, at this point, getting student representation of their responses. On the back end, Pear Deck is collecting the data by each of the students who have submitted a response. And I'm going to show you that after we conclude the slideshow. I'll show you the back end of where the slide responses are kept for each student. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide. This is a multiple choice question. So which of the following options best describes the intersection of primary forms of technological and content knowledge? A, B, or C? Notice the slide itself is not locked, and you should be able to respond. And I can keep tabs on how many responses have been made. So use your device and select A, B, or C. And once I know I've got all the responses, I can lock the screen. There we go. And I'm going to show the responses. Slide my screen over a little bit so you can see the percentages. Okay. The correct response is C, technological content knowledge. And so now I can actually go back and again, as I see the individual student data and kind of remedy the individual students at a later time. Okay, so we've got about half the class, 7 out of 17 have incorrectly responded. So we maybe work a little bit more on that concept to understand a little bit more about the TPACK framework. Let's talk now about SAMR, which we've been studying over the last 3 weeks, and TPACK, and understand the perspective of each of these tools. So we are recognizing that SAMR is the substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition of the classroom through the use of technology aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. These are linear level tools. So that means you don't have to start with substitution and move all the way through to redefinition, but do consider about how the classroom environment is changing as you employ the tools. So the modification and redefinition of teaching previously wouldn't be able to be done without technology. In substitution and augmentation, it might be that what you used to, when we were face to face and when we are still face to face, that we still may use worksheets. The worksheets can be created into digital worksheets, and so that substitutes the face to face interaction. Other tools like redefinition may be used to facilitate digital field experiences, which wasn't possible otherwise. You would have to load students on a bus and get permission to move the students in the bus and get over to the zoo. And it's just a little bit, it's a very varying logistical experience when you redefine the classroom. So also in a redefined classroom, students analyze, evaluate, and create a little more handily than they would in a regular traditional classroom where the logistics have been changed dynamically. With the technological pedagogical content knowledge, it's not either SAMR or TPACK. It is a combination of them both. But we need to understand that TPACK really is is the employment of technology, pedagogy, and content as they intersect, and how the experience for learning is different. So there's a relationship with the content that's facilitated by the technology. So the blending of those three elements is very key to facilitating a rich learning experience for students. You can actually utilize the concepts of TPACK and leverage the modification and redefinition through Bloom's taxonomy with technology tools. So there's differences, but the two can work in conjunction with each other when you have a clear understanding of how each of them functions in the classroom and learning in the learning environment. So those are very key differences. Moreover, research has been done that really help identify the learning activities based on taxonomies. So those are grounded in technology integration. So when we're talking about learning activities and we think about what exactly students can do with specific taxonomies within a content area, okay? So they're routinized for teachers over to simplify the planning and coordinating the classroom activity. So then there's this flexibility and responsiveness to students in a contextualized classroom. So for instance, math classroom learning strategies may have very different hands-on manipulatives that are digitized now that might not be as useful in a language arts classroom. So specifically in a language arts classroom, there's some strategies that we understand work well with that content. And so those activities have been also then framed within taxonomies and technology integration. We're going to take a look at those through our activity this morning. I have one more interactive activity, and this is true and false. So true or false, possibilities for technology use should be considered according to the types of learning activities that each digital tool or resource best supports and is regarded as grounded technology integration practice. Again, use your device, true or false. To 13 out of 17 responses. All right, we have everybody. I'm going to lock screens and we'll see where we are. Excellent. We're at 100%. So everybody has really grasped hold of that particular concept about learning and well grounded in technology and technology integration practices. All right, I have advanced to the next slide, which actually is a hyperlink. And if you're following along on your own slides, you should be able to click on TPACK and LAT activity. And we're returning now to the hyperdoc. Okay, so we just engaged and I hooked you into the content that we're going to be just actually engaging with throughout the rest of the morning. These exploration links are reminding you that we have within the slideshow the ISTE Learning Keeps Going website URL and the Wide Open School. And those are resources that you can use for planning your engaging activities. Also, keep in mind those could be, you can return to here or go back to the slideshow and copy paste those into your tech toolbox. I put the SAMR wheel in there also, just as a reminder that that is a very useful tool for lining up Bloom's taxonomy and SAMR and having action verbs for student performance. This next part is about learning activity types. And you can select, now I'm going to empower you to actually pick a content area of interest. And what you're going to do here is you're going to actually research and read the information that's accompanying this material. So for example, in the secondary English language arts area, you're going to find at the School of Education, the College of William and Mary, some information about language arts and learning activity types. And I'm going to give you 15 minutes to read through and independently comprehend this information and engage with the variety and your choice of a learning activity type. So in this particular case, we're looking at the activity type for language arts in a pre-reading activity. So activating and generating knowledge or making predictions, these are descriptions of those activity types and the potential technologies that you might use to integrate those activities. And as you scroll further and you start to see more examples, you absolutely want to use this resource as a foundation for particular content area types. Okay, so that is one example. Now, out of the content areas shown here, it's your choice. You can pick one, and in 15 minutes, you will have digested that material and actually reviewed that material, return to Padlet, and apply your thinking. Okay, so we're going to actually jump back over to Padlet. And this is where I'm going to be monitoring your input. Okay, so this Padlet, you can see I've created columns for each of the different activity types and the curriculum areas. So I picked language arts, and I'm actually going to use a post-it here in language arts. And I'm actually going to take the content and I'm going to copy paste this out of this template here. You can do this while you follow along with me. And I'm going to put my username in the top, and I'm going to copy paste that post-it note there with the blank structure. And then I'm going to return to the content area of my choice and read and think and have examples. Now, the lesson activity types or the possible technologies column opens ideas for you, but you could always return to the SAMR wheel or any of the other resources and apply your own thinking about a particular idea you have for a lesson activity type. So it's 9:03, and I'm going to bring you back, and we are going to share out. So I'm going to bring you back, we'll say at 9:20. So you have a little bit more than 15 minutes. I'm going to stop sharing. You may close your video, turn off your mic, take a quick break, come back, and then be productive within the Padlet. And I will remain right here. If you have any questions, let me know. You can open mic. I have one thing to check in the chat room I see. Okay. And so a little note, and you are on your own. Please let me know if you have questions, progress, or process along the way.